How's it going, guys? This is Soul Singed here, and welcome to my review of episode 2 of Battlebots. I know I'm getting this out later than I did for the first episode, and I want to apologize for that. I've been really busy this past week. A lot of stuff has been going on in my personal life. I'm not really going to get into it, but I've just been busy. And that's also why I'm only doing the screen recording type video. I didn't really feel like trying to get the camera out and all that good stuff. But do let me know in the comments which style you prefer. The style where it's just my voice, or me sitting in front of the camera where you get to look at my ugly face. Now, before we really get into this interview, I want to address another rule change that they mentioned in the show this episode. Kind of came up a couple times, once directly and once indirectly. That is, they have changed the way they do countouts. Now, it's still the 10-second countout, but whereas before, if a robot was not showing controlled movement, so like if they had a wheel knocked off and they were just spinning around in circles, or all they could do is just kind of crab walk around and couldn't really do anything, they would be counted out. However, this season, the rules have changed to where if a robot is showing any sort of transitional movement, they can avoid being counted out. I'm assuming they did this to help clear up the controversies surrounding fights where a robot feels like they shouldn't have been counted out because they were crab walking, but still kind of moving toward their opponent. One thing that bothers me about this rule is there's another rule that states if you refuse to engage with your opponent, you will be counted out. So if your robot is working perfectly fine and you're just driving around in circles and showing no intent of engaging with an opponent, you will be counted out or disqualified and lost that match. Which doesn't really make sense because that basically means crab walking will get you counted out, because if you're showing transitional movement, you can't be counted out. But if you can't engage with the opponent, you'll be counted out. But if your opponent hangs back waiting for you to be counted out, they're not engaging with you, so then can they be counted out? It's one of those really wishy-washy things that I don't feel like it really solves anything, to be honest. But I don't really think it's going to affect anything too much because I feel like the show is just going to run like normally. Anyway, that's enough of me blabbering about that. Let's just talk about the episode itself. So for the first fight of the night, we had Sawblaze versus Hypershock. Sawblaze wanted to get Hypershock inverted. Hypershock can run inverted, but just not as well. And they succeeded in this. They got a couple hits in, got 2 of their wheels knocked off. And on the final blow, Sawblaze's hammer saw dug in so deep that they had to call a timeout and unstick them. Now, this is a lot more common than people realize. It's just a lot of the unsticks are not televised. They'll cut to the camera angle to where it was after the unstick. That way, people don't realize it. If you ask anyone that's been to a live show, they will say, yeah, unsticks are actually quite common. They just edit most of them out for TV. However, this one they couldn't edit out because it ended the match. The crew members went in to unstick them, and unfortunately, they could not get them unstuck. In fact, this kind of became a fiasco throughout the episode. It wasn't until toward the end of the episode they were finally able to basically cut Sawblaze's hammer saw out of the frame of Hypershock to get them unstuck. So they called the timeout, crew members went in, couldn't get them unstuck, the match was called. And when the match is called like that, it goes to the judges, and Sawblaze won the judges' decision. It was a very good, both bots looked pretty good. Sawblaze looked very good, like usual. Sawblaze looks like they could go all the way. We'll just have to wait and see. The next match was very interesting. We had Fusion versus Emulsifier. First of all, I just want to say I'm kind of shocked that Fusion has returned, because usually after a season or 2 of a robot not working out for Team Waiachi, they will abandon it in favor of a new design. This is the third season of Fusion, so I feel like it's the make or break year for the Fusion robot. If it doesn't work out this year, they're probably going to retire it. One of the big issues that Fusion has had, since it's running both a vertical and horizontal at the same time, it is very prone to overheating. And it basically burns up in a ball of flames in almost every match. If they don't get a KO within the first minute, they go up in a ball of flames. And then Emulsifier is a new robot from the same team behind Shatter, and it is a big vertical spinner with treads, or tracks, whatever you want to refer to it as. It's using belts as their treads. One thing I do like is they have 2 treads on each side, so they can afford to lose one and still be able to move around. A little bit of redundancy as their backup plan in case they do suffer some damage. I was a little skeptical. I love treads, by the way. I absolutely love them, but was a little skeptical because treads can tend to be kind of fragile. So we have a brand new robot with potentially fragile mobility and a robot that just goes up in flames all the time. One change that Fusion has made is they have moved their speed controllers, which has been the main overheating problem, closer to the horizontal spinner, so the horizontal spinner can kind of act as a fan to keep them cooler. And this match, both teams had some promising moments and some issues. What put Emulsifier at a disadvantage very early on was the fact that they had trouble getting their weapon up to speed. It looked to be some radio frequency issues because it would spin up, then stop, spin up, then stop. And during that time, Fusion basically could do whatever they wanted. They got some really nice hits in, damaged their treads, and one thing that did shock me that I do like is their treads suffered a pretty good amount of damage, and they were still mobile. Once Emulsifier got its weapon up to speed, they got some hits in, seemed to be evening out the match. And then Fusion blew itself up. It caught fire, but was still driving around. And then Emulsifier, also, they had suffered so much damage on their treads that they did lose mobility and were barely moving enough to avoid a count out. In fact, there was actually a little back and forth between both teams where Emulsifier was calling for Fusion to be counted out because they weren't really engaging. They're just kind of driving around because their robot was slowly dying. And then Fusion was saying that Emulsifier should be counted out because they were just kind of spinning around in circles. But it was so close to the end of the match that neither team got counted out, and it went to the judges. And Fusion won the judges' decision. I believe that's the right call, as Fusion did get more hits in and did do more damage, even though I believe, as of the current rules, it doesn't matter what causes the damage, the other team will get credit for it. For example, if Bot A rams itself into the wall and damages itself, Bot B will be credited that damage regardless. So that's, as my understanding, how the rules are still. I don't know if that rule has changed or not, but as of last year, that's how the rule was. So Fusion got the W, and yeah, both of these bots had issues, but they both had some highlights. So it'll be very interesting to see what both of these teams do throughout the season. The next match was very weird. Mammoth versus Valkyrie. Valkyrie came out and got caught on Mammoth's little tusk fork. They did have to be unstuck, but that wasn't shown on TV. They edited that unstick out. But both of these bots just seem very weird. Now, they're under a new captain, a new driver, Team Valkyrie is. And their new driver kind of scares me because she seems very, very amateurish. Fortunately for her, Mammoth lost mobility fairly early on into this match, and they also broke their rotary lifter, which is their weapon, and their self-rider. They broke one half when they were falling over, and when they tried to self-ride, it snapped the other bar in half, basically giving Valkyrie a secure W. They did go in for one more hit, and Ricky pleaded for mercy, saying, "We're dead! We're dead!" Because he was already down for the count and did not want to see his robot damaged more than it already was. So, unconvincing win for Valkyrie. Valkyrie looked to have a little bit of issues, but seemed to be operating pretty normally. It's just their driving was very questionable. And this is not me trying to talk bad about their driver. I don't know much about her. She could just be very new to this and need some time adjusting to driving a heavyweight, similar to Gigabyte having new drivers, so definitely have to see where they go. And this could potentially be the last season of Mammoth. Prior to the fight, they mentioned how Ricky was disappointed in last season and even contemplated scrapping the whole idea of Mammoth in favor of something different, but decided to give Mammoth one more shot. And it lost its season opener in a pretty bad way. So, if they end up not doing so great, this could be a farewell to the biggest Battlebot. Next, we had Mad Catter versus Whiplash. Now, last year, Whiplash did not use their vertical spinner at all. This fight, they had it and never used it. I'm not sure if they just chose not to use it or if it died very early on. And Mad Catter looks like a freaking beast this season. They got some nasty hits in. They were super dialed in. And the finishing blow to Whiplash sent them flying up into the air. And might be the most height we've seen a robot give without being a flipper. I think the only time I can ever remember another robot getting sent flying that far into the air was in the Golden Bolt tournament last season, where Black Dragon fought a 150-pound Perfect Phoenix. I know Perfect Phoenix was severely underweight because he had to remove one of the weapon motors or something like that, and they were severely underweight, and one of the hits sent them skyrocketing into the air. But this is a full 250-pound Whiplash that got sent flying into the air by Mad Catter. If Mad Catter can keep this up, they could make a very deep run in the tournament. Whiplash, I'm not going to count them out yet because they just went up against a top-tier opponent. Like I said, Mad Catter is super dialed in this season. Watch out for Mad Catter. Whiplash can hopefully bounce back from this. And then next fight, we got our second rookie bot of the night with Banshee versus Switchback. And they kind of compared Banshee to Sub-Zero, which Sub-Zero's always been the kind of robot where they were fairly durable. Didn't always do that great, but when they were on point, they were on point. Unfortunately, very early on in this match, Banshee got its flipper bent so it can really get under Switchback to do any meaningful flips. They got a few small ones in here and there. And Switchback, I don't know how to feel about. It definitely looks a lot better than last year's Switchback. Switchback might have one of the biggest glow-ups I've ever seen in BattleBots. Their weapons sounded dangerous, and they got some decent hits in, but the whole actuating arm that is their main unique quality seemed to break very early. They never really moved it too much, and it seemed to be broke. Because at one point it got stuck in the backwards position, and one of Banshee's flips just kind of tossed it back over. But Switchback got the win here. Not the most convincing win. Banshee looked okay. We don't know what kind of flipping power they have because, like I said, their flipper got bent very early, so they weren't really able to fully utilize it. But Banshee also has some issues to work out. Definitely going to be interesting to see what both these teams can do in the future. I don't see them going very far unless something major happens in their next fight. A lot of these robots, I'll be able to tell what they're going to do after their second match. Next match, we had Hijinks versus Big Dill. Hijinks, one of the largest undercutters in the sport. Big Dill, a robot that hasn't really had much chance to shine. And not only are they just a lifter this season, they've also added a vertical spinner because, of course they would. However, this match, they did not run the vertical spinner. They instead decided to go with this massive anti-horizontal wedge. And Hijinks got some good hits in, ended up getting inverted and lost the weapon later in the match. But it didn't really matter because Big Dill just kind of went up in smoke and died. And was counted out, and Hijinks got a KO. Yeah, Hijinks they hit as hard as ever. They just need to work on their weapon reliability. And then finally, we have the main event, which is one of the strangest main events I've seen, because it was Blip versus Ingame. Ingame being arguably one of the best heavyweight robots in the world, and Blip quickly making a name for itself as one of the best flippers with their unique flywheel flipper design. Blip got its butt kicked. Ingame dominated this match, and Blip was not able to get any flips in whatsoever. What really hurt Blip in this match is their front wedge. They went in with these little piano key wedgelets, they call it, which are designed to where it can take some damage and they can lose a couple of the wedgelets without completely compromising the entire system. However, in-game basically ripped off all the piano keys, so they basically had no ground game. And Blip is the kind of flipper designed where it has to have that ground game. Because of the way its flipper is, it has to basically make its opponent ramp up on them to a degree in order to launch them. And without those wedgelets, they just could not get under in-game. And in-game is masterful with the ground game. So yeah, Blip was basically just a blue wedge out there trying to push against endgame and rapidly firing its flipper to no avail. But one good thing I can say about Blip is they took a lot of shots and just kept on ticking. Aaron Hill said the robot seemed to be completely undamaged, though in the match it looked like it was suffering some drive issues, but that could have just been Aaron's driving. I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, in-game had a very convincing win. They look as powerful as ever. And Blip, I mean, what can you really say? No, they didn't put on a good performance. Yes, they got dominated, but look at who they were going against. Now, unfortunately, I believe Blip's next match is against Tantrum, which really hurts me because I love both of these robots, and one of them will have to go 0-2. But thankfully, we have 4 fights this season, so fingers crossed that whoever does go 0-2 can finish out 2-2 and make a strong case for making the top 32. 2-2-2-2-2. I just kept saying that, so whatever. But, yeah, definitely a very interesting episode, and, had some really great fights. And predictions-wise, I didn't do that great. I only got 3 of the 5 matches correct. No, wait. 4. I got 4 of the 7 fights correct. But, yeah, that pretty much wraps up this video. Peace.